Aloha, one and all of you GBA fans. Welcome to the weekly recap for Week 9. I am Ospastic1. As you may be a little confused, confusion is not here this week. Instead, I am here with the ever-talented... Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, it's Choice CJ here from your Game of the Week video, stepping in to do the weekly recap. Thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to it.
CJ is the analyst of the week, just saying that right now. Being able to help in and jump in a quick notice. Thank you, CJ, for your time. So we'll just jump straight into these matches. We're going to start off with the San Diego Chargers versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Envy bringing Empoleon, Landorus Therian, Alolan Muck, Magnezone, Virizion, and Alakazam. Battler X, the newly revived Battler X, bringing Como-O, Licky-Licky, Meloetta, Mimikyu, Swampert, and Xurkitree. Right off the bat, Swampert going for the EQ on Empoleon, fully expecting a kill. Surprise, it's a Sash. And Empoleon Okos with Grass Knot. But then the next turn, dies to Xurkitree. So, turn 3, we're sitting at 5-5. The rest of the match does not go as quickly. Meloetta popping Alolan Muck's Figgy Berry early in the match, Battler X knowing he needed to do that in order to make sure that he could KO it later on. Good play, even if X had to sack the Meloetta, which after the Intimidate drop, the physical variant of Meloetta, the pure red form, could maybe have taken it down, but it's unfortunate, but he managed to take it down later on. Figgy Berry popped, brought Alolan Muck up, but Gigavolt Havoc Xurkitree takes it down. Normally Alolan Muck would have lived a Thunderbolt at that point, and that's what Envy was banking on, but nope, Gigavolt Havoc. Battler X pulling out a couple of early surprises, but Envy has plenty of tricks up his sleeve. Virizion KOs Xurkitree with a close combat, eventually going down to Mimikyu after a second close combat brings its defenses down, but then Mimikyu goes down to Magnezone. Then Battler X makes the risky play of Como-O, expecting a switch after Trick Room was set up by Mimikyu. Expecting Magnezone to switch out, fearing the Earthquake. Instead, Envy stays in, eats the Dragon Claw no problem, proceeds to Flash Cannon, take a huge chunk of damage off of Como-O. Como-O follows up with the Earthquake, takes out Magnezone, but at that point Trick Room is almost out. Alakazam comes in, takes out Como-O after he missed a Rock Slide, hoping for the flinch and the Sash Break at the same time. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. Trick Room runs out, Alakazam is back on top of the speed tier, takes out Como-O, then takes out a very weakened Licky-Licky. Unfortunate, Licky-Licky managed to do some decent Wish Protect work, but it just wasn't enough for Battler X to try and stall him out. Envy just playing too offensively, too fast, and well, Alakazam comes in and finishes the match 2-0. What are your thoughts, CJ?
So this game was, I think, pretty close. You know, it's hard to... I want to give Steve a hard time for running Trick Room yet again, but the fact of the matter is that he really almost pulled it off this week. If he had clicked the EQ on the Magnezone like you had mentioned with the Como-O, could have really pulled it off. If the Licky-Licky had Wish Protect instead of just a naked Wish, then he might have been able to take out the Lando eventually. But as it was, I think Steve should feel pretty proud of his performance, you know, going to a close 2-0 versus a competitor like Envy. So with that, we will now move into our next match, which is the Pittsburgh Paraditas versus the San Francisco Arcaniners. Tup brought Scarf Nidoking, Defensive Blissey, Scarf Staraptor, Expert Belt Tapu Koko, Sub Leech Seed Tangrowth, and Sub Hex Chandelure. George brought a Sub Salac Garchomp, Mixed Defensive Registeel, Spadef Vorcoon, Assault Vest Raikou, Assault Vest Entei, and Swords Dance 3 attacks Mew. Now, you already see the score there on the screen, so this is a bit of a doozy. Lead matchup is Nidoking versus the Garchomp. George smartly sees the Choice Scarf on the Nidoking coming and switches into the Registeel expecting the Ice Punch. Registeel can go for Rocks, which invites into Blissey. Blissey can go for Rocks, which invites the Garchomp back in. Now, Garchomp is looking like a big threat after it clicks a Swords Dance on the Tangrowth switch in. And we have a little bit of a funny turn of events. The Tangrowth can go for Leech Seed on the Garchomp. George is actually hoping that he might get into Salic range with a HP Ice, but Tangrowth is of course not packing that. And then once the Tangrowth gets off those seeds, it can get off a Substitute. Registeel comes in, but George quickly has to switch into Suicune in order to get off a Roar. A few turns later, we find ourselves in a similar situation where Blissey is in. It invites in the Garchomp. Garchomp can Swords Dance on this Tangrowth switch in. And then on the same turn, Garchomp and Tangrowth both go for the sub. Tangrowth breaks the sub with the Giga Drain. Chomp just goes for damage to break the sub. Chomp SDs again as Tangrowth subs. And eventually they kind of dance around each other until eventually Chomp does end up with the Salic Berry proc, gets a +1 speed boost, it has +4 attack, and Tangrowth is sitting there naked, just waiting to get KO'd. After Tangrowth goes down, you, unfortunately for Tup, see one by one all of his Pokemon drop. You see the Staraptor drop, Tapu Koko, so on and so forth, and that is going to be the game. If Tup had perhaps preserved the Tangrowth, switched it out, got a regen boost, brought it back in, switched out for an additional regen boost, he might have been able to stop the sweep, but as it was, George does find himself on the winning side of a 6-0 this week. What are your thoughts?
We're going to see a couple of sweeps this week, but this is a perfect demonstration of the power of setup mods, and SD Garchomp is a very dangerous mod. It doesn't get Dragon Dance, which, oh god, if that thing got Dragon Dance, it'd be even scarier, but he does get the Salic Berry, he does get the speed boost with 2 Swords Dance boosts, and then just sweeps. I mean, you covered all the good points. Garchomp is a monster. Not much else to say there. But so we'll just switch into the next match. We're going to talk about the Detroit Steel Wings versus the Utah Jasmine. Chase bringing Life Orb Volcarona, Yachi Serena, Leftover Slowbro, Scarf Magneton, Scarf Kyurem, and Lefty Sylveon, while Stevo brings White Herb Cloyster with a Shell Smash, Scarf Physical Swellow, Shed Shell, Tricky Klefki, try saying that 12 times fast, AV Lantern, Rocky Helmet Hippo with Whirlwind and Rocks, and Rindoberry Manaphy. So early on, Serena stays in versus Cloyster to spin away its T-Spikes, which is risky but ultimately rewarding as he gets it off the field twice. But Chase loses Serena before Rocks go up, and then Rocks are just sitting on his side of the field for the rest of the match, which is a big problem for Volcarona and Kyurem. So Hippo and Slowbro trade Toxics early in the game, both of them being whittled down, Slowbro having to continually switch out just to keep its Regenerator going, and Hippo having to switch out so it doesn't continually rack up the toxic damage. Volcarona comes in, eats some rocks, but does get a Quiver Dance up, and KO's Lantern, but this is where Stevo's prep comes in. He knew Volcarona would likely be a Quiver Dance variant, so he brings in Heart Swap, and it goes off. He eats a Giga Drain with the Rindoberry, knowing he could live it. Heart Swaps, takes off the Quiver Dance boost for itself, and then KOs it. But then it quickly dies to a Kyurem Draco Meteor. Great idea, great execution. I wish that thing could have done more, and it had the potential to do so. Unfortunately, it just got taken out a little too quickly. Klefki. See a lot of Klefki coming in, setting up screens, keeping its defenses up for its teammates, allowing them all to live some good special hits. But Crimson managing to stall out Klefki screens repeatedly, especially with the Sylveon coming in, because knowing, after figuring out that Klefki did not have steel coverage, all it had was Dazzling Gleam, knowing he could take it on 1v1, yeah, it took a T-Wave, but Sylveon's already slower, doesn't really matter that much. Sylveon goes down, and then Kyurem comes in, finishes Hippowdon with the Ice Beam after Klefki goes down. So no big sweeps like we see Chase like to do on a regular basis, but he still comes out with a neat win. A lot of good sets that ultimately didn't come to full fruition. Like, we didn't really see Shell Smash Cloyster go off. Scarf Magneton did come in handy, but not nearly as much. We saw Scarf Magneton and Scarf Magnezone. Spoiler alert. We already talked about that. Son of a bitch. So we see Scarf Magneton and Scarf Magnezone. Lots of Scarfs this week. Yeah, all in all, a really good match. Good prep on both coaches. Ultimately, Chase just playing defensively towards the end, stalling out screens, and then allowing Kyurem to come in and finish off.
I really liked the creativity that Steve-O showed this week. It had been a little bit lacking all season long, but the Heart Swap Manaphy was really awesome. I almost wish he had gone with Heart Swap 3 attacks, because he might have been able to clean up the game from there if he had been packing Dazzling Gleam instead of Tail Glow. As it was, I think the Toxic Spike strategy was a great one, because it was really going to wear down the team that Crimson brought this week. You know, he had the bulky Sylveon with Wish, it was a Spadef set, and, you know, just all the other bulky mons, the Serena. But he unfortunately just couldn't keep up the Toxic Spikes, and so his strategy didn't work quite as well. The Light Screen was nice, but he just couldn't take advantage and get a chance to, like, set up with anything and do some big damage. Really, his Pokemon just ended up getting whittled down to the point where either Scarf Kyurem or Scarf Magneton was going to be able to finish Steve-O off. So, great game, and we will hop right on into the next one. So the next game is the Philadelphia Scizors versus the Free State Torrcats. And Chimp brought a bulky Rain Dance Thundurus, Sash Zoroark, Rocky Helmet Fortress, Choice Specs Volcanion, Roost Kyurem Black, and a Cold Burberry Defensive Decidueye. Duncan brought Calm Mind Keldeo, Assault Vest Weavile, Spadef Torkoal, Chlorophyll Black Sludge Venusaur, Rock Polish, Sugarberry Metagross, and a Scarf Lando Eye. First turn of this game featured something that I don't think I had ever seen before. It's Volcanion versus Weavile. Weavile goes for a knockoff, gets for the Choice Specs, and because of the Assault Vest, is able to survive the Flamethrower from the Volcanion with 3 HP. Assault Vest, new meta. The next turn, he pivots into Keldeo, as Volcanion goes for Sludge Bomb. Keldeo gets poisoned. It's quite unfortunate for Keldeo. Keldeo has been on the losing side of a fair bit of hacks this season. I think this is the second or third time it's been poisoned. A few turns later, and a little bit of pivoting around, Torkoal does come in and set up rocks, but that invites in the Volcanion. The Volcanion is able to 2-hit KO it with a combination of Flamethrower and Steam Eruption. Lando can revenge kill the Volcanion easily with Stone Edge, but Fortress comes in, gets a free spin, which is going to be really nice for the later game, not getting any extra chip damage on things like Kyurem and things like Thundurus. Venusaur does come in on the spin and scares up the Fortress, but Duncan makes a nice prediction and goes for Sludge Bomb, anticipating that Kyurem Sludge Spin, and he lands a poison of his own, so that sort of makes up for the poison on the Keldeo in some way. Keldeo does come in as Kyurem collects Shadow Ball, and it's eventually going to die when Decidueye comes in and roosts until Keldeo dies to poison. Lando comes in and clicks Knockoff, but Decidueye gets off a big hit before getting KO'd. I really liked the next play. Chimp went into Fortress, and facing down a Lando Eye, he goes for Volt Switch, predicting the Weavile switch in. Probably the biggest play of the game came just a few turns after that, when Kyurem Black is in versus Venusaur. Kyurem Black takes a big Sludge Bomb to the face, is in the red, and Black Sludge trips before the Leftovers does, indicating that the Venusaur is probably faster. And based on the EVs, the Venusaur did indeed outspeed by 1 point. So, not wanting to lose his Venusaur, not realizing that it was actually faster, Duncan goes into the Lando and sacks it off to an Ice Beam, which is a really critical play because Scarf EQ, Scarf Stone Edge could have really put in the work. But as played, Metagross comes in after the Lando dies, clicks Rock Polish, and unfortunately, the Metagross cannot touch the Fortress, and it could have actually potentially 3-hit KO'd with EQ, but Duncan does go for a Meteor Mash on one turn, and it does not have the ability to take out the Fortress before the Fortress can kill Metagross with a combination of Earthquake and Rocky Helmet. Venusaur is going to be the last-ditch effort for Duncan, but it does die to the combination of Thundurus and Zoroark, and that is going to be a 3-0 victory for the Philadelphia Scizors. A good game. There were a couple moments where Duncan maybe could have switched things into his favor, but all in all, Chimp just really controlling the hazard game, keeping his Pokemon like Kyurem really healthy, preserving the Sash on Zoroark would have been really critical because he could have gotten off knockoffs, plus Sucker Punch on that Rock Polish Metagross if needed, Sucker Punch on the Scarf Lando if needed. So who knows how it could have turned out, but it's something that I enjoyed all the same. Spastic, what are your thoughts?
Another great game with some great prep. Watching the team builders, you see some creative sets, but again, another case of great preparation, great sets that don't always go off properly. Duncan loves him some Torkoal Venusaur combination. It's good to see a coach taking full advantage of weather, especially with a new Weathermon, Torkoal just now getting drought. So it's interesting to see the new-ish weather dynamics coming in. Not completely new, because we saw Fizz in Season 5 play with weather to good effect. But good sets that didn't get to go off. Rock Polish Metagross, I was really hoping that thing could put in some work, but unfortunately it doesn't. Fortress is irritating. So the next match we're going to talk about is the St. Louis Rampardos versus the Florida Gators. A-Drive brings Ground EMZ Terrakion, Air Balloon Victini Special, Life Orb Scissor, Life Orb Clefable, AV Golisopod, and Scarf Exploud, while Gator brings Leftovers Rocks Roar Heatran, Eviolite Doublade, Max HP Max Defense, Rest Sleep Talk Gyro Ball, Pyukumuku bringing Curse Baton Pass with Mental Herb, Hawlucha with the White Herb, Diggersby with the Silk Scarf, and Latios with Dark EMZ for the Z Memento. We'll talk about that later. So, early game, Gator gets rocks up early, which unfortunately Clefable misses 2 Focus Blasts in a row against Heatran, allowing it to take a lot of damage from Flash Cannon. It is the game we play. Dan brought a lot of high power, low accuracy moves this game. He acknowledged that it was going to be risky, and unfortunately, this gamble did not fully pay off, as we'll see in the later games. And later on in the game, Dan went for the Tectonic Rage on Terrakion, knowing he was sitting in front of Doublade, hoping that Gator would miscalc and predict it would just take an EQ, not expecting a Ground EMZ. But unfortunately, Gator does switch out to keep the damage to a minimum on his Doublade, switches out on Latios. Ground EMZ is ultimately a wash. Unfortunate, but Gator made a good prediction, made a good play. Dan went ballsy, it didn't work out in his favor, unfortunate. However, he did get a lucky para on Latios from Victini firing off a Thunder. First of all, he hit it, that was a small miracle. Second off, he got the paralysis, nice extra miracle. However, it didn't really prove too useful as Latios immediately went for the Z Memento. That threw Dan off. He was expecting it to be a DQ because it was originally banned. He thought it was. Yeah, it originally broke the game, but they since patched it. So that may have thrown off his game a little bit. He seemed kind of perturbed by it. Regardless, it was a good strategy, allowing Hawlucha to come in and set up on Golisopod. Golisopod was down by 2. Its attack wasn't what it could have been. So without needing to set up a substitute, Gator just goes for the Swords Dance. Golisopod can't break it, even with Liquidation and Aqua Jet. Even though it doesn't need to lose its even though Hawlucha doesn't need to lose its White Herb, it still is more than able to take down Golisopod with an Acrobatics, which Dan is already on the downslide, losing some of his stronger defensive mons. But Victini coming in on Hawlucha, living a superpower on 5 HP, if I remember correctly, and then revenge killing it with Blue Flare. And then he comes in, he hits Diggersby hard with Blue Flare, bringing it down to a good amount, but Diggersby sets up an Agility, and this just spells the end for the rest of Dan's team. Victini goes down, Scissor comes in, Dan plans to click Bullet Punch, knowing full well it'll kill, but expecting Diggersby to switch out, Preservation. goes for the U-turn, but Diggersby is faster, and Scizor loses. Dan loses his last priority mon, and then Diggersby just proceeds to clean up with Earthquake and Frustration. A-Drive feeling a lot of frustration after that missed opportunity, but again, this is all about the late game, this is all about the preparation, it's all about taking chances. And sometimes you win some, you lose some with the guessing game, and unfortunately, Dan was on the losing end of the guessing game. What are your thoughts, CJ?
Yeah, so the play that everybody is going to be talking about probably for the rest of the week is the exchange between the Scizor and the Diggersby, as you mentioned. But there was some lead up to that, and Gator, I think, kind of had the game in hand, but then made his own mistake. If he had clicked Gyro Ball on the Victini instead of Rest, that would have allowed the Hawlucha to score that KO with Superpower, as you mentioned, would have activated its White Herb, and then Hawlucha would have outsped the entire team, and would have potentially won the game right there. But as it was, the Victini was able to live, and if the Diggersby could have been stopped, Dan would have been in great position. The Bullet Punch, hindsight is 20/20, but Bullet Punch does seem like it was the right play, because if Heatran did come in, then Scarf Terrakion, or sorry, not Scarf Terrakion, Rock Polish Terrakion could have been the sack, and then the Choice Scarf Exploud could have come in and clicked Focus Blast for the win. Of course, he has to hit all the Focus Blast, which is something none of us ever want to rely on.
Focus Whiff.
But yeah, Focus Whiff, Focus Miss, it's really tough. But when the risk of that play is so high and the reward is so low, you just have to wonder, maybe we just would have been better to make the Bullet Punch play. But again, as us as spectators have the luxury of saying would've, could've, should've, it's always harder when you're in the driver's seat and you're the one who has to make the play, and you're judged by thousands of adoring fans, sometimes not so adoring fans. So we'll give Dan a break, and we will go ahead and transition into our next match. This match took place between the New Orleans Pelippers and the Aloha Athletic. The Pelippers brought Fighty MZ Infernape, Icicle Plate Sneasel, Akaberry Skarmory, Quick Feet Jolteon with Expert Belt, Physically Defensive Uxie, and a Fast Assault Vest Goodra. Callum brought Scarf Emboar, Bulky Superfang Crobat, Rocky Helmet Drotagon with Roar, Chesto Rotom Wash, a Bulky Modest Shaman, and Stealth Rocks Excadrill. Early on in this game, it is a little bit of hazard control as Drill sets up rocks versus Uxie. Uxie just goes for a knockoff to try and scout what sort of drill it is. Drill switches out into Rotom, and Uxie gets up its own rocks, which Drill promptly comes back in and spins away. The Rotom comes back in, but Uxie makes a nice play U-turning into the Goodra, which the Rotom obviously cannot threaten, but the Rotom can go right on into Drill. Drill probably sees this as an opportunity to get up rocks again, but the Goodra instead goes for a Dragon Tail and bites the Rotom back in. And I think that Callum was surprised by John's Draco Meteor from his speedy Goodra, and it takes out the Rotom. Drill comes back in again, and it spins as Skarm comes in. A little bit of, again, this sort of roaring around, hazard control, things like that. Eventually Emboar comes in and is able to hit the Skarmory, but the Skarmory is holding an Akaberry. And John had EV'd the Skarm to outspeed Adamant Emboar, but he learns at this moment that the Emboar is actually Choice Scarf. So it's able to take out the Skarm, and that Emboar is looking awfully scary. Infernape comes in, goes for the all-out pummeling. Could have been really cool to land that on a Pokemon from Callum's side, but the Excadrill, which was already at low HP, just comes in and gets sacked. A little bit of a waste of a Z move, but it's always fun to watch that in the match anyway, so for me, it was a cool moment. Crobat comes in and has the opportunity to basically get a kill to it KOs the Uxie. And then these next series of plays were really well thought out by John, I thought. Jolteon comes in versus that Crobat. He knows that the Shaman's going to come in, and he can Volt Switch really easily into Sneasel, which threatens the Shaman with the Icicle Crash. It's probably going to lure in the Emboar, and instead of going for that obvious Icicle Crash, he goes for the knockoff, removing the Choice Scarf from the Emboar, and I think that was really the nail in the coffin for Callum, because Scarf Emboar could have potentially cleaned up all of John's team, but as played, Emboar is actually able to take advantage of its lack of Choice Scarf, go for a Sucker Punch on Jolteon, get it weakened. Then the Infernape comes in, gets a crit on the Crobat, and it's looking like it's a really close game. Sneasel comes in versus the Shaman. Shaman survives the Icicle Crash, knocks out the Sneasel, then Jolteon is able to finally come in and kill the Shaman with a Signal Beam, and we have a very, very close 1-0 on our hands. And this was probably the closest game of the week, one of the most exciting games of the week. And I think both coaches would tell you that they were just happy that this was such an exciting game. Win or lose, it's always nice when it comes down to an awesome finish. What are your thoughts?
You said it exactly. This was a very exciting match to watch. Both coaches were really excited and really happy with the end result. Yes, it was a 1-0, but like you said, it was a very close 1-0. John loves his Jolteon. He's really good at playing around with it in the late game. And Callum's really figuring out how his team works. Initially, it seemed like he wasn't too terribly comfortable with it, especially when he had his front office builded. So he just tried to figure it out, but he's really getting a feel for it. Yeah, it's week 9. We're really late in the season, but I mean, yeah, Callum's sitting at 3-6. Spoiler alert. But he's figuring out his team really well, and yeah, he did manage to bring it to a very close 1-0. So, again, really fun matches to watch from both perspectives. The coaches seem to have a good time, but the next match we talk about did not seem that way at all. We're talking about the San Francisco Giants versus the San Jose Sharpedos. Geo bringing Leftovers, Taunt Tapu Fini, Muscle Band, Arcanine, AV, Conkeldurr, Black Sludge, Clear Smog, Amoonguss, Power Weight, Gyro Ball, Trick Room Bronzong, and Wish Protect, Lefty's Umbreon with Foul Play. While Tom brings Safety Goggles Celesteela with Seed and Protect, Scarf Thunder's Therian, Life Orb Nidoqueen, Eviolite Porygon 2, Banded Zydoge with 1000 Arrows and 1000 Waves, and a physically defensive Leftovers Gardevoir with Will-O-Wisp and Taunt. And Wish, even though it only has base 65 HP. But hey. So, early in the game, Gardevoir shutting down Bronzong with Will-O-Wisp and then Taunt, nerfing its attack and then preventing it from setting up rocks. Also, Gardevoir running Trace allows Tom to figure out what kind of sets Geo is running. Porygon 2 and Gardevoir both running Trace ended up allowing Tom to scout a little bit better, plan a little bit better, including Porygon 2 switching in on an Arcanine, switching over to Flash Fire, and eating a Flare Blitz. Nice play, but we'll see what happens. Arcanine makes up for it by blitzing the Nidoqueen, doing a lot of damage, forcing Tom to essentially just sack him. Umbreon has a really strong Wish Protect game. Living crits. There were a lot of crits this game. Umbreon lives quite a couple of them, gets its own crit Foul Play on Thundurus, and for a good chunk of the middle of the game, we see a lot of switching around with Celesteela and Umbreon, both coaches pulling out their defensive cores to try and keep things in their favor. And then Power Weight, Gyro Ball, Bronzong. Oko's a fully physically defensive, max HP, max defense Gardevoir. Now, Gardevoir isn't that physically bulky to begin with, having really low physical stats and a low HP, but ultimately it could have lived it, but Geo brought the Power Weight, which is not an item that is seen a whole lot, especially in this competitive Draft League format. For those who are a little confused, who may not have seen Geo's team building, Power Weight reduces a Pokemon's speed by an additional 50%. The secondary effect doesn't really matter as it's EV boosting, but this made Bronzong super slow, which made it a perfect Trick Room user. It could have taken full advantage of it, but ultimately it didn't need to. It just O-code a Gardevoir. Yeah, it was timid, so that just helped out the Gyro Ball damage. And the rest is silence. So P2 comes in and traces Regenerator from Amoonguss. Nice. Gets a little bit of health back, but ultimately Conkeldurr comes in and sweeps with a combination of Drain Punch and Mach Punch. Now Tom prepped extensively for Ditto, making sure his team couldn't be taken full advantage of. However, Geo didn't even bring Remix, and it seemed to throw Tom's game off a little bit. But again, just the presence of a Mon on a coach's team really shows just how much of a psychological impact it can have on the team building. So the circumstances around this game, this is probably going to be a talked about game. Understandable. Both coaches worked late, crazy hours. Both had long shifts. Both had awkward time zone conflicts. They did the best they could. When they finally did get to face, disconnect. Like, not even early disconnect, a mid-game disconnect. They tried to faithfully recreate it twice on Wi-Fi. They kept disconnecting, so the match finished on Showdown. Again, not the flashiest, not the prettiest, but they got the job done. And Geo comes out with a clean 6-0. But again, real life happens, and sometimes it just gets in the way. So, but aside from that, good game. Geo kept the momentum in his favor, kept Tom's team down. Good match, even though it was a 6-0. What do you say?
Yeah, I'll just echo what you said, and I'll tip my hat to both of these guys for doing everything they could to make this battle as true to the original as possible. It's just a real testament to those guys and their dedication for doing everything they can. In regards to the match, I'll piggyback on a point that you made. Pokemon like Ditto just will continually be undervalued in drafts because of the way that they affect team building. And this is true of Pokemon like Dugtrio, if Shadow Tag Gothitelle is permitted in your league. Even Pokemon like Diglett, with the ability to pack Arena Trap, even if it's got the lowest base stat total of any Pokemon that gets drafted that season. They just change the way that you have to team build. And for that reason, they're always going to be worth more than what their tier is or what their point value is. Because of that, Tom didn't really prepare a team that could break through the bulk that Geo brought. Pokemon like Umbreon were just such a problem, you know, and then Pokemon like Amoonguss, Tapu Fini all just have amazing bulk. Tom didn't really bring any wall breakers. He brought a Scarfthundy instead of a Specs. He didn't bring Darmanitan to nuke the potential Amoonguss. So when he just couldn't finish off those big walls and his own team got whittled, he was cleaned up by Darmanitan, or sorry, not by Darmanitan, by Conkeldurr, and that's gonna be a recipe for a 6-0 loss. So I'm looking forward to seeing Tom bounce back next week. He's been a kind of on a roller coaster season. He had some really nice wins in the beginning and middle of the season. Now he's on a little bit of a down streak, but he's shown that he's got a pretty potent team, one that I like quite a lot, and I hope he can pull it around. And of course, we were all rooting for Geo, who is on, I think, on a 4-game win streak after kind of a bad start to the season himself. So fingers crossed for both these guys. We'll move right along into our last game, one of the most anticipated games of the week for me, and that is the Tampa Bay Luxrays versus the Borussia Donphan. Mono brought Choppleberry Miltank, Offensive Assault Vest Rachi, Mixed Life Orb Greninja, slightly physical leaning, Nasty Plot Salazzle, Scarf Buzzwole, and Dragon Dance Life Orb Zygarde. Meanwhile, Lars brought Culperberry Celebi, Chesto Resto, Bulk Elf Tornadus, Kebiberry Primarina, Sub Salic Heracross, Rocky Helmet Donphan, Black Sludge Nihilego. And let me just start off by saying that this match did not disappoint. Right off the bat, Primarina is facing down a Greninja, and Mono is fearing the Kebiberry, which was brought in the first match. Expecting this, Lars makes a really good prediction and goes for Scald. Rachi comes in and gets burned, which is going to start whittling it down immediately, Combo that with the fact that there's a Rocky Helmet Donphan that deals chip damage to the Rachi as it goes for Grass Knot. And by the end of the exchange, Rachi's going to have less than 10% HP. Greninja does come in and take out the Donphan eventually, but the damage has already been done. Primarina comes right in, and it gets an easy KO on that whittled Jirachi with a Moonblast. Miltank comes in and gets up rocks, but Miltank unfortunately gets hit by a Toxic. Miltank is not packing the Cleric set, so it gets whittled eventually, and Celebi is able to recover stall it until that eventually dies. Salazzle comes in and is able to whittle down Nihilego before Nihilego kills the Salazzle with Power Gem. Greninja comes in and gets another revenge kill. Even with Torrent, you know, and without any Protein or Battle Bond, I think Greninja is an amazing Pokemon in Draft League. But the Kebia Berry Primarina is able to come back in, and Greninja does click the Gunk Shot, maybe on the off chance that it doesn't have that berry, but alas, Primarina survives and is able to kill the Greninja. Zygarde comes in and starts clicking Thousand Arrows, but Lars is packing the perfect counter to it with the Colbert Berry Celebi. Even after the Dragon Dance, Celebi is able to very easily live 2 crunches. He's able to 2-hit KO with HP Ice. And this sets up a potentially pretty exciting late game for Scarf Buzzwole. Poison Jab is going to be able to kill that Celebi, and it would have potentially 2-hit KO'd the Heracross, but of course, as I mentioned, it is a Salac Berry Heracross, and once it gets in range, it's able to outspeed the Buzzwole and 2-hit KO with Aerial Ace. Really fantastic prep on both ends. It was kind of in Lars's control the whole time, I would say. Although you really have to admit that if it wasn't for that Salac Berry Heracross, that I think Mono would have brought it back. And that's what made it so exciting, you know, even though it was, you know, kind of one-sided for part of the game. Not one-sided, I want to say, but Lars had a plan. His plan almost got turned upside down by that Scarf Buzzwole, and just really nice set being able to recover that game for him, and it results in a 3-0 win for the Borussia Donphan. Spastic, what do you have to say about this match?
I want to piggyback a little bit on what you said about Greninja. Greninja is a fantastic league format Pokemon, even without Protein and Battle Bond, like you said. It has a pretty diverse move pool, plus it can run both physical and special offensive sets. It has decent utility with Toxic Spikes, but it's a good mod that can bring a lot of different sets, and so far, Mono has managed to play with it a little bit, bringing not the same set every week. Even though he does really like to bring Greninja, and coaches know to prep for it, it's still difficult because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. However, like you said, the Salac Berry on the Heracross really saved Lars. Scarf Buzzwole could have come in and had a field day with his team, but Lars prepping for that little bit, prepping for the late game, it came through, it came in handy, and Heracross wins it. So, it was a great game. There were a lot of good games to watch this week, and that was one of the better ones. So we'll talk about the kill leaders. Let's talk about these guys. So, we're still looking at the same top 3 as before. Cobalion, Crocodile, and Virizion. Not a whole lot has changed there. However, a lot has changed from last week in the 4 through 10 slots. Landorus, Jolteon, Mamoswine, Swellow, Garchomp, Conkeldurr, and Mew are now sitting in the 4 through 10 slots. Terrakion has fallen off the list. Jirachi also fell off. Dragonite and Staraptor all falling off the list, and Jolteon rising up. Did I say Swellow fell off? Swellow did not fall off. Okay. Edit. So, Jolteon rising back up onto the kill leader list, as well as Lando Incarnate. Again, this is not Sheer Force Lando, but it doesn't matter. It's still putting in a lot of work. Getting 11 kills, and yeah, it has 8 deaths, but hey, it's still putting in a lot of good work. Again, John loves his Jolteon. Getting a lot of good AV kills, living some hits, surprisingly. We see Conkeldurr back on the list, but again, this this match, this kill leader list is not dominated by fighting types like a lot of times you see. Garchomp rising onto the list courtesy of that big sweep this week. So we do see a couple mons that have benefited from sweeps, Cobalion, Crocodile, and Garchomp, but a lot of these other mons have gotten some clever kills, some good switch kills. And hey, it's week 9. We saw a lot of changes from week 8, so hey, it's still anyone's game at this point. We have a lot of mons sitting at a high kill count that aren't on the top 3, but all it takes is one sweep or one good set of kills and this whole thing will change. What are your thoughts on this kill leader list?
Yeah, it's really cool that it's continually evolving. You have Pokemon rising and dropping the whole time. The 3 fighting types are all really awesome to me. Cobalion still leading the charge. It's funny that Chase didn't bring the Cobalion or the Crocodile this week and was still able to secure a victory. He was able to use a more bulky strategy more than a very offensive trying to sweep strategy. Landoi, as you mentioned, still applying a lot of pressure. Duncan, a big fan of the Choice Scarf sets, and sometimes mixing up with Rock Polish sets and things like that. Garchomp sneaking in off of the back of a 6-0 sweep. Conkeldurr getting 4 kills this week. I'll be really interested to see how this list finishes off to end this season. I think there's some Pokemon that are in like the 11 through 20 or 25 range that could sneak up to here. Dragonite's one that I have my eye on because it does have that Z Crystal and the ability to go for Dragon Dance. So if you can get off just one big sweep to finish the season, I think that it can vault its way up to maybe the top 5. But a lot of just really awesome sets that have propelled these Pokemon into the top 10.
And we'll see what happens through the rest of this. So we'll break down the conference standings. We'll talk about the Sun Conference first. Chimpact handily leading the division with a 7-2 record, sitting at a plus 17 differential. Gator sitting at 5-4 with a plus 9. Duncan 4-5 with a minus 7, and Dan with a 3-6 at a minus 8. That is the breakdown of the Ula Ula. It's, even though Chimpact is really ahead with a 7-2, it could still change. Dan struggling towards the tail end of the season. I'm really hoping he can pull things around. Duncan's managing to maintain neutral ground. Gator maintaining largely neutral ground with his wins and losses. So the Ula Ula is still up in the air. The Pony division, there's still a lot of contests there. Mono and George almost neck and neck. George just ahead with a little bit of differential. A lot of that coming from the 6-0 sweep. Lars holding his own with just one more loss, but he's still sitting at a good differential. And Tup sitting at 0-9 with a negative 29 differential. There's not much to say about that. So Pony division is still looking promising. Any standouts for you, like as far as coaches and differentials?
Yeah, so as interesting as the standings are to me, I'm going to be really excited to see how they shake up after Week 10. We have a couple of really important matches in Week 10. The Florida Gators are going up against the Borussia Donphan. So that's really going to be perhaps the deciding game for that final playoff spot. Duncan, is not far behind. He could potentially sneak up into there with some wins, but that's the game that I really have my eye on. And this is kind of the first time all season that Mono hasn't been in that top spot in the Pony division. George just now finally surpassing him. I'd wonder if George is going to sneak into the top 3 of the power rankings for the first time this season. He's been itching to get back into that position. So yeah, those are the main things that stick out to me. Really going to be trying to tune in for some Week 10 action.
But don't sleep on the Moon division, the Moon Conference, the Melee division in particular. Granted, Chase is the only coach with a positive differential. However, 3 coaches sitting at 5-4. Yeah, Tom's sitting at 3-6, but hey, he can still pull things out. Gio getting a nice win this week. bumping up his pretty bad differential from last week. Utah Jasmine still hanging in there. Chase still sitting at far ahead of the division as far as kills go, as far as differential. But, things can still change. Maybe Gio can get another 6-0, who knows. Steve-O could pull off a surprise win. Tom could shock us all. You never know at this point. It's only week 9. There's still a few weeks to go. But the Akala division, MV still sitting head and shoulders above the others. 8-1 has the highest ratio in the league so far, with a plus 21 differential, also sitting at the highest differential of the season. But John sitting at 6-3, coming in close behind him, getting a couple of good wins, but a couple of really close wins in his favor. He doesn't have as good of a differential as he could have, but there's a lot of entertainment value there. And speaking of entertainment value, even though BattleRX and Milwaukee Bucks are sitting at 1-8 with a negative 22 differential, there is a lot of entertainment value to be had there. Yeah, BattleRX is down on his luck, but hey, the videos are still entertaining. But Callum sitting at 3-6 with a negative 11. I'm really hoping he can pull something out before the end of this season. He's really getting a mesh for his team. Hopefully he can pull off a couple of good wins. Maybe he'll get lucky, maybe not. But as of right now, it's looking like Envy and John are going into the playoffs. So yeah, that's the Moon Conference breakdown. What do you think?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tight races going on here as well, especially in the Melee division. I'm excited to see what happens next week with Crimson, because he is going up against Lord Envy and his San Diego Chim Chargers. So if he wants to maintain his lead in that division, he's really going to need to come up with a W. The Giantes are going to be going up against the Pelippers. These are two teams that are going to be directly competing for wildcard slots, so that's a really important game for all of them. And meanwhile, Callum, as you mentioned, really needs to make some magic happen if he wants to sneak back into the playoff race. He might be able to make that happen if he can sneak a win versus the Utah Jasmine and Necro Stevo in Week 10. And, you know, talking about entertainment value, maybe we'll find out that BattleRX is going to Battle City next week in his Week 10 match. Who knows? He just wants to stay the heck out of the Shadow Realm. That's all that I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to see that he is revived. After Cresselia betrayed him, he was mysteriously struck down, but he is back.
It's very heartbreaking.
Oh my god. That was such a traitor. Cresselia, you traitorous bastard. So, there's a lot of good stuff happening. Stay tuned. Yeah, it's week 9 and we're close to the end of the season, but there are still plenty of surprises to be potentially had. Stay tuned for the rest of the season. CJ, thank you again for your time. Thank you for stepping in. Be sure to tune in for his show on Friday. I will see you all later. Aloha.
Peace.